this next panel is something that I end up thinking about a lot, which is the balance of tradition and innovation. We work a lot with very large organizations and trying to push them forward to try new things, but stay true to their core, right? And that there's always a give and a pull. And I couldn't be more excited to bring both John and Elizabeth to the stage. So why don't you guys come up, and I'll give a little intro to both of you. But our whole conversation, please, today is this idea of that tension between traditional and innovation. So John is the CEO of the California Milk Advisory Board. He leads efforts in innovation and consumer engagement to boost demand for California dairy. With a background in global marketing from roles at the Almond Board, Procter & Gamble, and PepsiCo, John has helped position CMAB as a leader in dairy innovation. I would like to say notably launching the Real California Milk Accelerator, among many other things he has done. But please welcome John Talbot. And I'm very excited that I got to meet Elizabeth in person for the first time. So John and I both have been on Elizabeth's podcast and have gotten to know her as well. But Elizabeth's the senior editor at FoodNavigator-USA, which is an influential news source for the food and beverage industry. Based in DC, she covers trends in innovation, regulation, health, and nutrition. And she is the host of Soup to Nuts podcast, which is awesome. You all should go listen to it. But it brings industry insights to life and help food businesses navigate emerging challenges. Her expertise is in food and business journalism. So now, awkwardly, I won't introduce myself. I'll just move over here.
Well, thank you all so much for having me and putting on this amazing show today. I think, you mentioned the podcast and you were both so gracious to be on it years ago, I think, when I first learned about the Real California Milk Accelerator. And I was really struck by two things, and we're going to talk a little bit about them today. But the first was this really unique model that you've created. I talk with a lot of accelerators that focus on one part of the value chain. So maybe they just help startups, or maybe they just help farmers. But this accelerator is cool because you're bringing together everyone across the value chain. And so that was one thing that stuck out to me. The other was the high caliber of the participants that you bring together and just the breadth of innovation. I did not know you could do so many things with dairy, as I've learned from working with you all. And I think it's interesting because as innovative as the products are, they really do still pull on this deep tradition that's in dairy, which you mentioned we're going to talk a little bit about today. And so while I'm eager to talk about the innovation side, I think maybe a good place to start is with the basics and telling me a little bit, or telling all of us here a little bit about the Real California Milk Accelerator and why it's needed and what you all are doing. And so, John, maybe you could start by explaining why innovation in dairy matters and how you all are approaching it.
Sure. People have been eating dairy foods for thousands of years, and I hate to say it, but somewhere along the line, the dairy industry got a little complacent, even to the point where we would refer to ourselves as a commodity, which absolutely drives me crazy. Any of my team will tell you I hate that word. And I heard a guy talk about it actually on a speech 4 or 5 years ago, and the guy happened to be from Harley-Davidson. Okay, not dairy, but Harley, obviously worldwide known for customer satisfaction, customer loyalty. And he said something that stuck with me, and he said, all commoditization is self-inflicted. And that hit me right between the eyes, and I said, that is dairy to the T. If we want to be relevant to today's consumer, we have got to really focus on innovation, on differentiation, on customer experience, on service orientation. And at CMAB, one of our top priorities is this idea of trying to foster a culture of innovation throughout the dairy industry. And programs like the Excelerator here are exactly what we're trying to do that. The California Dairy Innovation Center, you heard from Veronique in the last panel, what she's doing. And what we're doing day to day with dairy processors, trying to connect the dots, trying to get people to talk to each other, trying to explore ideas. All of this stuff is just absolutely vital to the industry's future.
And so you're in your 6th year now with this program, which is crazy. Tell me a little bit about high level, how it started, but then also how it's going. What's the impact been?
Sure. Well, it's a fun story how it got started. Fred and I met at a conference purely by chance. Just happened to sit down to him next to him at breakfast, and what do you do? And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool, what he's into. And we started kind of rolling around this question of, how might we combine two of California's most valuable resources. On the one hand, you've got this, nutritious, delicious California dairy products, and on the other hand, this insatiable entrepreneurial spirit, places like Silicon Valley. And all of a sudden, this was really starting to sound exciting. I get home from the conference, and Bob had just been to a dairy farmer meeting and said, we got this great idea about starting a Shark Tank for dairy products. And boom, 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 lights go off, and get Fred involved in the discussion, and lo and behold, here we are. 6 years later, 300 some entries, 50 some participants, 17 of those products are still in the marketplace. So that's, for any business, that's a pretty good track record.
That is a pretty good track record, and I think it really speaks to the work that you all are doing to help facilitate and build these brands and businesses. Fred, I am curious if you can tell us, John sort of mentioned doing the thing you do, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it is that you're doing and sort of how your role is in the innovative part of this.
Yeah, so the thing that I do, I love that. I think the line, by the way, that I hope anybody on my team is here will write down is that commoditization is self-inflicted. That is such a great line. But that's what our business is at VentureFuel. So I started it 10 years ago, and the idea was, how do we help large organizations that are successful, that have built really interesting businesses that maybe have commoditized in some way or have become a legacy industry, and they're trying to think through what their next chapter is going to be. Whether that is growth, right, new products, new innovation, or also like disruption insurance. How do they protect against startups or new entries into markets or new consumer changes? And so that's what we do all day. That's all we think about. And we do this across all different industries. So we're working with Comcast on media and technology and generative AI. We're working with ARP Foundation on how do you help low-income seniors. And so it's really fun to tackle different industries, and it's all with this idea of how do we ignite change by partnering with startups. And the idea, the name of VentureFuel is there's a better way to fuel your venture. Because I kept talking to startups and they kept saying, I got to raise money, I have to raise money, I have to raise money. I was like, don't worry about raising money, build a business. Figure out if someone will pay you for what you're trying to do. That's how you fuel your new venture. You need to find the blue chip partners that can enable that. And so when I sat next to John very serendipitously, he said, have you ever thought about innovation in dairy? And truthfully, I said, no, I had not. And we started talking, and I was like, this is the perfect example, though. I bet there are people out there that are launching businesses that have an idea but are not sure how to commercialize that. And what if we could combine the best of what CMAB does with that finding of the right startups that have a new idea and help facilitate them getting on shelf and scaling their business. And that's where this all kind of came together.
I think this is really interesting, and the work that you all have done in this short 6 years is pretty dramatic. And at the risk of aging myself, I do remember being sent to the grocery store as a child to get the white milk with the light blue cap. And it was between that and the red cap, and that was it, right? That's all I saw in terms of branding. Yeah. But now you go and the dairy aisle, the milk, just dairy milk. There's so many choices. And I want to talk about how the market can sustain these choices because it's answering a consumer need. So I would love if you guys could talk a little bit about what role the consumer plays in driving innovation in the dairy segment.
Well, consumers are hardwired to look for new products. Okay, there's always a better mousetrap out there. It's almost a Darwinian thing. You think back to it, it was all about survival. You had to find new things, and people are driven by what's new. In fact, it's the most powerful word in the marketing toolkit is new. It's not free, by the way, it's new. And consumers tell us what they want, and we can either listen or not listen. And that's the key. We have to listen. We have to be aware of the changing attitudes, the changing need states, the trends of what they like and don't like. So the consumer really has to be the center and drive all of what we do.
I think what's really interesting too, and one of the things that's made this partnership so successful is that focus on the consumer. A lot of times innovation it's either like a startup petting zoo, where there's some startups and everyone goes, oh, look at the cute little startup, and then they go back to their day job, unless it's based on a consumer pain point. And one of my favorite parts of our partnership is early, before we even choose the theme, is we say, what are the consumer trends? What do consumers look for that maybe isn't addressed in the marketplace? And so then when we go out to look at all the different dairy startups around the world that we then have apply for this, we're basing it off of there's an unmet need in the marketplace, where there's a trend that we see that potentially they can break through. So with any client in any industry, we're always like, why are you doing this? What is the pain point? Is there an opportunity here? Because you don't want to just innovate for innovation's sake. So that's one of the things that's made this successful over time.
And looking at the Accelerator program, the themes have changed over the years, in part to meet that consumer need and those consumer trends. And when I look across this year's cohort, I see, a shelf-stable meal replacement drinks from Toto. I see dairy-based energy shots from Stellify, a cottage cheese-based ice cream designed by an athlete for athletes that's really high in protein, and that's Smear Case. So there's obviously this common thing, or theme rather, around health and wellness. To what extent is that the future of dairy, and to what extent is there still room for indulgence?
Always room for indulgence. But the dairy, and I'll say specifically milk, forever has been about 13 essential nutrients, right? Everybody knew that, they've seen it, and it just became kind of background wallpaper. Consumers now are more interested in whole health. And even as Lauren said this morning, this idea of nutrition has evolved into whole body health and wellness. And we have to learn how that shift, is happening. But dairy's benefits line up very well with the functional need states that Lauren was talking about this morning. Things like physical performance, heart health, weight management, gut health, even emotional stability. All of these things, these are the new world that we live in, and we have to learn how to position our products to consumers relative to these new evolving need states. But the nice thing is there's a great match between what consumers are interested in and what we have to offer.
Yeah, I think you talked about the evolution of the program. I do remember during the pandemic, we had the snack Excelerator, and I remember it because I had about 18 cartons of different ice creams show up on my doorstep as a judge to taste. That was pretty awesome. So the indulgence is there on the innovation side. I think what's cool is consumers are less about this or that and more about and dairy is really great at that. It is able to provide the health and wellness benefits and the indulgence. And so some of these products skew more one way versus the other, but I think that's the power of this and the opportunity to tap into entrepreneurs that are seeing ways to take what are maybe very health conscious products and get that into an indulgent state that's better for you.
I love it when there's permissible indulgence. So someone with a serious sweet tooth and a deep love of creamy things, this is great news. And there are some great ones out on the Expo floor who are balancing both the indulgence and the better for you. When it comes to innovation, The idea is essential, obviously. Meeting consumer trends is important, but it's still really only part of the equation. There's still so much more to building a business and building a brand successfully. And so I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about how the Accelerator is helping founders to navigate the dairy industry successfully. I know that you all had something like 18 mentors during this program, and you covered a lot of topics. So tell us a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the Accelerator program.
Why don't you start on that one?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting is every founder is at a different place in their journey. Some are great at marketing, but they don't understand how to produce their idea, right? And there's all different variations. And so over the years, we've evolved the mentorship. It's a lot more personalized now. So it's a little, if one person needs more marketing help, we're doubling down on that. But we also recognize there's certain things that every business needs to know how to do. How do you scale? How do you sell? How do you market? What is PR, legal? How do you work with distributors? And what we really did was say, okay, if we were launching a business, what do we need to know? And what are the successful businesses? What have they done? And so those are the mentors we go get. It's people that have done it, they've been there, they've moved the needle in terms of growing a business, so they can come back and talk to the founders and really have validity when they sit with the founders and help them. And I think, to me, one of the really special things is, and this is going to sound a little cheesy, but if you go to the Expo area, there's a lot of alumni companies from this program because it becomes a bit of a family. CMAB is so gracious with their time, their insight, their connections, that these companies scale with that help. And so it's almost like they become co-founders. So I love how this program's evolved, where we bring in the right mentorship for who's there, but everybody contributes, both CMAB, VentureFuel, and those mentors specifically, and we all want the founders to succeed. So we're all kind of rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll just add to one area there that always seems to percolate to the top in terms of issues for a lot of these startups, and that's co-manufacturing. Is, okay, I made this in my kitchen, now how do I make it commercially viable for the, to sell at retail? And that is not an easy proposition, and a lot of these folks don't have any experience in that. So fortunately, on our staff, we have a number of people that have tremendous expertise in that area, have been through that before. In fact, Ben Yee, I don't see him in here right now. Oh, there he is, yeah. Ben, 25 years at Safeway Albertsons, and the knowledge there that these folks are able to, soak out of Ben and Bob and Veronique to help, put their products together and get them viable and available for retail sales is really amazing. And it's great to see how fast that is happening. So that's a huge part of it. And the other thing also that Fred mentioned is getting them involved with prior year winners. Oh my goodness, I sat in on the mentor session just a couple weeks ago. We had 3 prior winners talking to our current, 24 cohort. And oh my goodness, the questions were just coming left and right. And you could really tell that, they appreciated that insight and that experience from our past winners.
And one thing I'll add on to it is each year we evaluate the program. We're like, what we could do better? What's an add-on? What's something new and interesting? And this year, one thing that was great was the opening kickoff. We usually tour a dairy, and we spend some time letting them know the California dairy industry. But we also did a tour of grocery stores. We sent the group out on like almost a scavenger hunt to see what those dairy aisles look like at all different grocery stores, then convene back and have a session with the dairy buyer at one of those retail stores where they could go right away and say, what's the pricing? What did you think of this? What would you ask me as a founder? And we were like, no holds barred. Like, be honest. Tell them why you wouldn't put them on shelf, what they need to improve. And I think like it's so rare to have that shot on goal, that at bat, without the pressure of I'm never going to get that meeting again. And so it was like this great moment where they could be very vulnerable and say, this is what I'm trying to do. Why does that stand out? Should I price higher or price lower? And I think that real world sort of experience is something that's helping this cohort accelerate faster maybe than previous cohorts.
So really addressing legitimate challenges and bringing forward concrete action items. And I will say, when I was walking the expo, everybody did say how much they love working with the other founders and with the California Milk Board, like how impactful it is. And that's one of the big reasons that they are joining. One of the things I said at the beginning that strikes me about this particular accelerator program is that, yes, there's this focus on end products, but that you did tour the dairy, that you are talking about how to uplift farmers and processors. So I'm hoping we can just talk a little bit about how these innovations impact upstream.
Farmers. Yes. We have actually, where's Essie? We have a dairy farmer. There's Essie from our board, actually. But at any rate, dairy farmers work harder than anybody in the world. And it's great to work with them, but they are in it for the long term, and when they see this kind of creativity and energy surge into the industry, that gives them hope and faith, that they will be able to pass down their business to their kids and their grandkids. And it's funny, I got asked once, how do dairy farmers measure success? And I said, by generations. Because that's what it's all about. So if we can do anything to help them see the opportunities and the hope in the future, I think we've won.
I also think it's such a good give and take. I remember the very first accelerator class, we were on a bus. Bob was speaking on the bus. It was rocking back and forth, and we were driving from a farm to a processing facility back to a farm, and we had all these founders. And they inject that energy, right, of the entrepreneurial spirit. It is really it is a palpable thing. When you see them pitch tonight, you can't help but get excited. But also they went on the farm, and they walked the farm, they talked to the farmer, they saw the cows, and that energy came back in the other direction of this is where the milk comes from. These are the people that my products support. This is the community I'm a part of. So it has this really tremendous give and take that I think works very well for everybody. And so it's something that we started from year one and have continued to kind of dive into, and why we today wanted to do a Future of Dairy Expo and really just keep thinking of ways of connecting the tissue between all the different parts of this community.
When we talk about measuring anything in terms of generations or the future, right, sustainability comes into play. And I think, rightly or wrongly, agriculture of all kinds is often scrutinized and criticized for how it's approaching sustainability. But as you mentioned, we're looking at generations. So these farmers are here to make the land a better place. It's not their goal to have it deteriorate and not be able to pass it along. And I think one of the things that's interesting is, again, walking the expo floor, is a lot of these brands are talking about sustainability. And so I'm hoping we can take a minute and explore this idea of how brands can work with farmers to promote sustainability, both on the farm and then within their products, and then also at the consumer level. So a good spot, I guess, to start with is, to what extent do consumers expect new products to have this element of sustainability? And how can collaboration help move that forward?
Well, the expectation is 100%. We have spent a lot of time talking to consumers about sustainability. What is it? Which is an interesting answer. It's all over the ballpark. And is it important? And, does it influence your behavior and all those kinds of things? And it's growing. It's still one of those things that there's a little more talk than there is action. There's a bit, we call it a say-do gap, okay? The difference between what people say and what they do is a little bit different. It's okay. But the values is what they want to see. And in every new product, there has to be some element of sustainability, some angle that points to, okay, we hear you, and we're trying, We may have not solved this 100%, but we're trying. And, consumers come back to us with the basics, okay? Sustainability is about animal care, actually. It's about recycling, and it's about environmental, issues. But there's so much more to that, and they get really impressed and surprised when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions and reducing that, and generating electricity and natural gas and everything else, all these things that are going on, and it's overwhelming, and they don't understand it all, but it sounds good, and it's what they want to hear, even if they don't understand it. So we just have to keep pushing it, and like you said, all the new products upstairs have some angle, some element of sustainability. They know they have to.
Yeah, I would say one thing that really impressed me the first time we went on a tour of a farm was the absolute love of the land and the animals. And to your point of being measured in generations, nobody is more focused on sustainability than those families. And so also to see their openness to technology. I mean, it was unbelievable, the things that were happening on the farm. I was like, oh, wow, you guys are on cutting edge on a lot of these different areas, and more so, and committed to diving into that. And then when we get into the program, we've had so many different products, from upcycling whey that was being discarded and turning that into new products, to a number of different, you can go upstairs and see all the different examples, but it's certainly something that you see on the marketing product side because consumers want it, but it's true. It's like at the farm level, the farmer level, it's something that they care about, they think about, and are always optimizing for.
I'm grateful that you also called out upcycling, because that's a huge trend, and you all have had some past participants. I think Wayward Spirit and Mitero really pushed this part forward, and it's a really cool way to make the most of everything, because it is very valuable. Every part is valuable, so I appreciate that. I have more questions because I'm a journalist. I always have more questions. But I do want to give folks in the audience a chance. If anyone out there has a question they want to ask. There are microphones up at the front. We do have one question in the middle. I don't know if we have a runner.
We can hear you too. I can repeat it if.
Yeah.
So when I think about tradition and innovation and legacy categories and companies, I can't think of anything bigger than fluid milk. So I'm curious, just when we think about innovating or fueling, do you see opportunities based on consumer need states or like pain points around innovation within fluid milk itself? Because I see so much dairy innovation like all over the store, but like when I'm thinking about milk itself, I struggle to see as many opportunities. And so I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, first of all, and Bob mentioned this earlier, we're seeing for the first, certainly in my tenure in 10 years, and it's probably been quite a bit longer than that since we've actually seen growth in fluid milk. And there's a lot driving that. Part of it is there's a little movement out of the alternatives back into traditional fluid milk, which is great. We love that. But also, as we heard earlier this morning, milk is right on the cutting edge in terms of a lot of these new need states relative to health and wellness. So that's a very positive thing. And there was something else I was going to say. Let me go to
I'll buy you some time. I think you're seeing lactose free, right? Yeah. Immediately. One of the things is like when something is really good, like it's hard to mess with it to some degree, but we're always looking for ways to tweak it, right? So use A2, lactose free. Then you start going into the flavors, right? And thinking about things like that, which obviously is taking the liquid milk and maybe moving it to something else. But a lot of the products upstairs, at least 50% is liquid milk, right? And so I think it's something that we're always pushing the envelope and thinking about. I think there's a lot of interesting things around liquid milk you could innovate, packaging, marketing, right? Thinking of some things there, maybe some of the process, which goes a little bit more upstream. But it's a superfood. We've looked at this at different times, and it feels like such a perfect base to jump off and do innovative things that I'm not sure how much you need to mess with the base itself.
I remembered what I wanted to say, and I think this is really important. We just looked at some data just in the last couple of weeks of the 50 highest growth dairy brands in the state of California, okay? This is based on actual unit growth. 21% of that growth came from high-protein, ready-to-drink beverages that were 90% milk-based. There were a couple that were milk alternatives, and there were a couple that were fruit-based, but 21% of the total growth was coming from milk-based and high-protein milks. So think Fairlife, think Core Power, think Premier. Those products are growing like crazy right now. And it's in part the protein. So protein is a big part of it, and it's something that obviously comes naturally in milk, but also comes in a whole variety of these milk-based beverages that are not 100% milk. But again, like upstairs, there's a number of them. So it's a very exciting time to see the growth in milk and the innovation in milk as well.
Am I allowed to contribute to this answer?
Yes.
So I recently spoke with Maple Hill Creamery, who does grass-fed milk, and they were talking a lot about how it's in fluid milk and bringing in these other sustainability stories, so really marrying trends to push forward against something that's maybe traditionally been seen as a commodity, but helping it to stand out. So what other claims can you make? You can make those health claims. You can make those environmental claims. I think a few years ago there was a company, and I cannot remember the name, they did a cream on top where you had to go back and shake it before you could drink it. So there is innovation, I think, across all formats of dairy, really.
Yeah, and I would say this program, like the most fun part, without question, is when we get all the applications. It is so fun. It's a little overwhelming, right? There's so many different ideas on how to innovate using dairy, and that's the core. Is like 50% has to be dairy, and we've seen everything from T-shirts, right, to all different types of ice creams. There's a frozen cottage cheese later today. Like there's a lot of unique things happening, and I think entrepreneurs are always the ones that are going to push that envelope, and that can be from a science and technology side, that can be in terms of new product ideas. But it's ripe. Each year we're kind of like, hey, there's going to be new ideas, and every year here comes a whole new slew. So it's a lot of fun.
Do we have other questions from the audience? Okay, well, I still have questions.
Let's go.
I have great big questions. I know that the whole point of this is the future of dairy. And so, John, what is the future of dairy? What is its potential for growth and innovation? And why should entrepreneurs continue to play and enter this space?
Well, again, there is this great alignment right now, in more than ever, I think, in terms of what consumers are looking for, in terms of their health and wellness need states, and what dairy has to offer, not just at the high level, the macronutrients, protein, calcium, vitamin D, all that kind of stuff is great. But what we're just starting to learn about are all the micronutrients in milk. Things like lactoferrin, which is only a small percentage of the volume of regular milk, but we're learning how to extract that. Now, it's still a very new science, but lactoferrin is one of the things that there was a lot of talk about when COVID came out, because lactoferrin is very good in terms of boosting immunity. And once we get the technology down to start being able to pull out some of these micronutrients, lactoferrin is one, tryptophan is another. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of micronutrients in milk. So again, with new technology, we will have the opportunity to create even more unbelievable dairy-based products. And so from an investor standpoint, I would think those are the things that, would make just a ton of sense and be of great interest.
I'm trying to decide if this is provocative. I can see like our marketing team up there, and they're always like, "Fred, say something provocative, but not that you will get in trouble about." I'm like, that's conflict. I see milk as an innovation platform, in the same way that when I'm down the road in Silicon Valley, I'm like, generative AI is a platform for entrepreneurs, right? You get Gen AI and you build an application over it, and that's how you go raise all this money, because you have this large language model, not to get too into it, right? But that's the platform on which you build your great idea. I think milk can be that platform in terms of food creation. It has all the micronutrients that John mentioned. It has all this value. It has great taste, like we talked about earlier. And it also blends well. It works with other foods and flavors and ingredients, and you can do all these things with it. To me, it's a very interesting way to create something new with like a really solid base. So I think of it almost as like an innovation platform.
I think that's a really good point. I get excited as a journalist talking about functional foods from, the claim side, high protein, but there's also the function of the food itself and what it does when you're creating a product. So I'm really glad that you called that out, because dairy does bring forward, like we said, both of the health, but also the indulgence, right. And that mouthfeel that can be really hard to replicate. I think the other part of our conversation that I want to revisit is we talked about all these mentors that you all brought in, and maybe Fred as a master connector of people. How can the folks in this room support innovation in this category? How can they support dairy farmers and the adoption of innovative practices?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. If anyone wants to be a part of this, come find us and anybody at VentureFuel, anybody at CMAB. We're always trying to figure out how to weave the community in, and if there's an area of expertise or however you'd like to get involved, let's talk and come up with a good way. I think that it's a really special program in that there's so much opportunity to continue it forward. Meaning, we know that there's all these amazing dairies in California that might have a farm stand, that have an interesting product that they're selling locally. How do you turn that into a monster CPG? That's a very interesting question that we've turned over several times. People that are working in processing facilities and see a way to improve that and make it more sustainable. Do those ideas end up on the floor or get discarded? How do we start to extract that from the people that are in the industry doing the things? You guys have these ideas, but you're busy doing the thing. So how do we start to pull those ideas and figure out a way to collaborate to build them? I think is a really interesting opportunity.
I'll just add, one of the things that anyone can do is not necessarily try and become an influencer. Okay, I'm not going to push you that hard. But we're all influencers among our peers. And we all hear outrageous stories of people claiming this, that, or the other thing. Jen is being tasked with trying to dispel some of the myths around milk and dairy. And all of us can help with that, in terms of questioning when people say outrageous things, or offering an idea, for, hey, you could use milk for that, or you could do this or that or the other thing. And so just by communicating within our own peer groups, our friend groups, in terms of, the wonderful nature of dairy, the indulgence, and the technical, the scientific side of it. But just through that communication, we could all do a lot.
When you say Jen, do you mean California Dairy Diva on Instagram? Because that's where you can all find her, and she is an influencer. And I think you're right. I think all of us, part of the purpose of this program too is to spread the excitement of these entrepreneurs that are innovating around that platform of dairy. And I think what's cool is each of them, when they meet the farmers, they get to understand the dairy community. They start to post not just about their products, but about what this experience is like and why they're doing it. And they come back to that core, so it's very authentic. And I think it's a good way to spread the sort of enthusiasm and excitement about the future of dairy.
I think that's a really good call to action. As a journalist, I'm always pro communication. So thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for sharing all of your insights today. And again, bringing us all together. It's been a delight to be up here with you. And I hope that everyone can go and visit those startups that we've been talking about. So thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.